Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today I'm watching how many continents are there by Mapman. Most people will tell you that there are 7 continents. However, you could make the argument that there are only 4. The 7 continents would be North and South America, Europe, Asia, Africa, Antarctica, and Australia. But you could make the argument that North and South America are one continent, just America. Or you could also make the argument that Europe, Asia, and Africa are also one continent. But I think the most widely accepted answer is 7. But let's see what they say.
When you look at the world map, it's immediately obvious how many continents there are and which countries belong to which ones.
No, it isn't.
That's right, that's why we're doing an episode about it. Welcome to Map Men.
We're the men.
And here's the map. All British primary schools rated at least satisfactory by Ofsted.
You know, when you look at the map, you would think that places like Turkey, Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia would be part of Europe rather than Asia. Meanwhile, the Middle East would be part of Africa. So Asia would end at Iran. That's what you would think. But nope, that's also just part of Asia. Even though you could split
All British primary schools
Africa
rated
and
at
Europe.
least satisfactory by Ofsted will teach their children that there are 7 continents. Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia, Antarctica.
Yeah, I mean, just look at that. You could easily say that Europe cuts off here at this line, while Africa stops here. So this is part of Africa, this is part of Europe, and Asia ends here at Iran. You could make that argument, because to me on this map it looks as if Asia is cutting into Europe and Africa. That's just how it looks like.
Antarctica, North America, and South America.
But other countries' curriculums beg to differ. In parts of Europe, they teach just 6 continents.
In Russia and Japan, they teach a different 6 continents.
And in South America, they teach just
Hold on.
6 continents.
In Russia and Japan, they teach a different.
In Russia and Japan, they say that it's Euro-Asia instead of Europe and Asia.
6 continents.
And in South America, they teach just 5 continents.
So who should we believe?
Whom should we believe?
Exactly.
So in South America, they combine both Americas and Europe and Asia.
Landmass separated by oceans.
I like that definition. It's exactly how I imagine a continent.
Good for you, Mark. Now take a look at a world map and tell me how many large continuous landmasses are separated by ocean.
Great. Australia,
1.
North America.
It's attached
Nope.
to South America.
But the Panama
Exactly.
Canal
Is man-made and definitely not an ocean.
Yep.
Point taken. So all of America.
2.
Antarctica,
3.
Africa.
Africa
Nope.
is only separated from
Suez.
Eurasia by another man-made canal, the Suez, so it doesn't fit the definition.
I see. So Afro-Eurasia.
Congratulations!
So according to the most common So Afro-Eurasia.
What about Greenland or Iceland, the UK, Madagascar, Ireland, Indonesia, the Philippines, Sri Lanka?
Congratulations!
So according to the most
And
common
parts of Canada
definition,
are also
there
not
should only
counted,
be 4
apparently.
continents.
Also, the largest of these, Afro-Eurasia, contains 86% of the world's population, making it a useless distinction.
I don't like this definition anymore.
Neither do I. So can we instead use another, more sciencey definition?
We can. The reason the Earth's land masses are as spread out as they are is because the tectonic plates that make up the Earth's crust have moved them apart over time, and using the major tectonic plates as our guide to the continents, we get a more even distribution of where they are.
Tectonically speaking, North America is separate from South America, Africa is separate from Eurasia, and Antarctica and Australia are separate from everything. Nice and simple.
But on closer inspection, this tectonic definition also has some major issues.
For example, Australia. The country of Australia is this bit.
But the tectonic
Yep.
plate, also called Australia, includes Australia and a bit of New Zealand, and half of the island of Papua, which includes both Papua New Guinea and the province of Papua, which is in Indonesia, which is in Asia.
Which is confusing. So to avoid this country-continent muddle, other names for this continent do exist, including Sahul, Meganesia, and Australinia.
Not to be confused with Australasia, an
Jesus.
increasingly unfashionable term describing Australia and New Zealand and some but not all of the Pacific Islands, so we're not going to mention it again.
So then, what continent does New Zealand belong to? By both our definitions so far, none.
When you look at a map, it seems as if New Zealand was supposed to be its own continent. Because look at this. Look at this shape. That's not that far on the water. If all this was above sea level, New Zealand could have technically been its own continent. Or just a really big island.
Good for New Zealand. What's wrong with not belonging to any continent?
Not being able to take part in the Olympics. Because this famous 4-yearly competition to see who can host the best fireworks display is open to every country in the world, its 5 continental rings must somehow include them all.
Each ring represents a different continent. There's Europe, America, Africa, Asia.
And this one represents a broad region including Australia, New Zealand, as well as the Micro, Mela and Polynesian countries known as Oceania.
Oceania, its very name meaning the opposite of continent, is not considered one by any strict definition, but it's a popular term, especially for the purpose of making sure no country misses out on being incontinent. Only Antarctica doesn't get an Olympic ring because it's too cold to host a fireworks display.
And because nobody lives there.
The tectonic and Olympic approaches
Except
could
for
be easily combined,
researchers.
including both Antarctica and Oceania, giving us a nice problem-free 6 continents.
Except it's not problem-free at all. We need to talk about Europe.
Whether part of a landmass or a tectonic plate, Europe appears to be nothing more than a glorified Asian peninsula. So, what actually is Europe?
Can it really be possible that the home of the continental breakfast isn't even a continent at all? And if so, what do we call that breakfast other than disappointing?
Which brings us to a third element to consider in the definition of a continent: culture. Knowing which continent a country's in immediately tells you something about what it's like.
And because Norway has more in common with Sweden when it comes to language, religion, ethnicity and favourite cutlery than it does with, say, Vietnam, a line is helpfully drawn here, breaking Eurasia up into 2 bits. But complicated culture can't be conveniently cut into clear categories.
Some countries cause tremendous headaches for this dividing line.
Yep.
First, Armenia, a country which, with a 95% Christian population, arguably falls in the Europe category, but geographically belongs to Asia. And, speaking as someone who's a 30s, arguably
Like I said, you could say that Europe ends here, at the border of Turkey with Syria, Iran and Iraq, as well as Azerbaijan, Armenia and Georgia also being included as part of Europe. But nope, it's part of Asia.
falls in the Europe category, but geographically belongs to Asia. And speaking as someone who's a 32nd Armenian, where do you think these eyebrows come from? I can confirm I have no idea what continent it should be in.
The second problem country is Turkey, which incessantly prides itself on being an Asian-European hybrid.
Food?
Asia.
Trading partners?
Europe.
Religion?
Asia.
Writing system?
Europe.
This leaves the dividing line with no option but to split Turkey's largest
Well, they have a
city,
little
Istanbul,
bit in
straight
Europe.
down the middle, misleadingly suggesting that the populations either side of the Straits of Bosphorus are somehow totally different from one another.
But they're
One
not.
way of solving the problem of where the line goes is to insist that it doesn't exist.
Which is the approach taken by Russia, which should come as no surprise because it's in Russia's interest to view Eurasia as a single continent.
If it's divided, that might make people think they're different from each other.
And when people think they're different, they like to talk about things like independence.
Yup.
To make matters messier, some European
They
countries
do.
have significant territories in other continents. The largest part of Denmark is officially in North America.
And France, with dozens of overseas territories, has put bits of Europe in Africa, Oceania, both Americas and Antarctica.
I knew Russia would have some other reason as to why they have Europe and Asia as one continent. I knew it had to be some sort of political reason. And I was fucking right.
Perhaps the best example of the difficulty of pinning down what is and isn't Europe can be found in the insufferable Eurovision Song Contest.
Insufferably fabulous.
In its first year, just 7 very European countries took to the stage: Belgium, France, Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Switzerland and West Germany.
But with more countries wanting to get in on the pop-tastic action, this quickly expanded, adding transcontinental Russia, dubiously European Georgia, Asia's Israel, Africa's Morocco, eventually giving up the geographical facade altogether with Australia's Australia.
What Eurovision demonstrates quite well is that continents are all about politics.
Every continent now has some form of political and economic union. There's Mercosur,
That's
the
true.
African Union, ASEAN, and of course the EU.
But these organisations are rarely drawn on the same lines as the continents themselves. Despite the number of people who confused Britain leaving the EU with Britain leaving Europe, it remains something which, tectonically speaking, we
There's people who thought that Britain was leaving Europe? How stupid would you have to be to actually think that? What?
can't actually have a referendum on. The underlying question in all of this is, why does it matter how many continents there are? Should we even care which one we belong to?
Well, no, not really.
No.
What the continents really represent is a human desire to use broad generalizations to categorize the world into arbitrary subdivisions.
So whether it's 7, 5 or even 6 continents, these subdivisions will remain as useful as they are argued about.
Are you really a 32nd Armenian?
So completely
I'm
useless.
a 23rd Hawaiian.
Are you really?
No.
That last part really reminded me of those Americans who are like, oh, I'm 1/30th Italian. That's so fucking cringe whenever they say shit like that. I hate it. I hate it so much. But yeah, it really doesn't matter how many continents there are. What would change if North and South America were considered as one continent by every single country and person in the world, compared to if they were considered as 2 separate continents? What would change? Very little would change. So it really does not matter too much. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, consider subscribing and leaving a like. If you're interested, why not watch this video right here? And with that, I hope I'll see you in the next video.